The morning sky was clear over Florida, a perfect January day. Families gathered at the Kennedy Space Center, cameras clicked. Eyes watched the massive shuttle Challenger, standing proud on the launch pad. Children waved flags. Parents held cameras, not knowing they were capturing more than a launch. They were capturing an ending no one could yet imagine. Inside the shuttle, 7 astronauts prepared, among them Christa McAuliffe, a teacher, ordinary human, meant to inspire millions. She had dreamed of this day long before NASA had thought of her. The countdown ticked, 10, 9, 8. Each number a heartbeat in the nation's chest. This was not just a launch. It was a promise, a symbol of human ingenuity, of dreams reaching beyond gravity. In control rooms, engineers monitored systems, computers, and telemetry. They had seen anomalies before. Warnings flashed, concerns whispered in cubicles. But politics and schedules held sway. The launch had already been delayed once. Public attention demanded completion. Excuses were whispered, not facts. And so the countdown continued. Challenger lifted, flames roaring beneath. The ground trembled with collective excitement. Spectators cheered. Cameras recorded history in motion. The shuttle rose, elegant and terrifying in its power. Then came the sound. Not a warning, not a distant rumble, but a crack, a hiss of escaping gas. A warning unnoticed by those who wanted the spectacle, the success, the narrative of American courage. Seconds passed. Then the world exploded in images burned into memory. Fire, smoke, metal, and the disbelief of millions watching live on television. The human stories were immediate, intimate, invisible to the cameras. Families in the crowd screamed, hearts frozen. Children did not understand the roar, only the shock on the faces around them. Parents tried to shield eyes and hearts alike. Some could not breathe, some fainted. The astronauts' training offered only minimal protection. They had rehearsed emergencies, but nothing prepared them for a catastrophic event at 14,000 feet per second. In offices, engineers whispered about the O-ring, about temperatures below safety margins, about memos ignored and warnings unheeded. They documented, calculated, and mourned all at once. NASA, the nation, and the world saw tragedy. But behind the screens, the real human impact was hidden. Shattered families, dreams ending midair, and a teacher's first flight cut short forever. Christa's students, watching live in classrooms, didn't fully understand death. They understood sudden absence. A teacher's laughter, voice, guidance gone. Their world temporarily collapsed. The other 6 astronauts were fathers, mothers, partners, children themselves. Each name now a symbol, each life a story erased from the future they had imagined. In the weeks after, the nation asked how this could happen. Public investigations began, televised hearings, reports thick with technical jargon. The human element, grief, anticipation, hope, was summarized in numbers, timelines, and percentages. It was easier that way, easier to digest than the truth. But families remembered, teachers remembered, engineers remembered. Those who watched live remembered, and they knew what the reports omitted, the warnings ignored, the fears dismissed. The cold night before launch, O-rings stiff from frost. The subtle knowledge that human error, politics, and technology had collided with deadly precision. In laboratories, in classrooms, in living rooms, the story was retold not always in numbers or formulas, but in heartbreak and whispered memories. The Challenger disaster was more than a failure of engineering. It was a failure of humanity to reconcile ambition with caution, to balance dreams with warning signs, to respect the fragility of life even when facing the infinite. The morning after, flowers appeared at launch viewing sites. Small memorials dotted the lawns of Kennedy Space Center. Students wrote letters to NASA, to astronauts, to the teachers and the engineers they would never meet. Some letters were never sent. Some letters never arrived. Because in history, as in life, not all voices are recorded. Not all grief is quantified. Not all lessons are learned before the next tragedy. And the human cost lingered, invisible, echoing quietly behind every news clip, every documentary, every future shuttle launch. The sky, once clear and hopeful, now bore the weight of memory. The silence that followed was deafening. A warning, not written in ink, but in loss. The Challenger disaster teaches something timeless, that progress demands risk, that ambition demands courage, but that courage, when mixed with oversight, politics, and human error, can explode in ways that leave scars for decades. It is easy to study rockets, O-rings, and timelines. It is harder to remember the people who trusted them, the teacher whose dream was to inspire, the astronauts who believed in science, training, and teamwork, the families who waited. History remembers launches. History remembers flames. History rarely remembers the human cost with the same intensity. The shuttle rests now only in memory, in film, in reports. But the stories of those aboard continue to teach. They remind us that beneath every launch pad, behind every mission, and within every human heartbeat, there is vulnerability. And that ambition, no matter how noble, carries consequences that cannot be erased. And the most haunting lesson remains. Human stories do not appear in time. They are felt, carried silently, waiting for someone willing to see, listen, and remember. Silence hung over the nation, heavy and suffocating. Television screens replayed the explosion endlessly. Clips paused and frozen on flames and falling debris. Each image was a reminder that curiosity, ambition, and trust had collided with fatal precision. But for those who lived through it, the real story was hidden between the frames, in the spaces the cameras could not reach. In homes across America, families grappled with questions no expert could fully answer. Parents explained death in fragments, children clinging to the notion that some heroes could return. Friends whispered, trying to make sense of the sudden absence of people who had inspired awe. Teachers reassured students that rockets were meant to explore, not harm, but the truth had already pierced their hearts. Those who had worked at NASA felt it differently. Engineers and technicians knew the warnings, the frozen O-rings, the internal memos. They carried guilt quietly, measured in small, silent increments, a hesitation before speaking, a hand trembling while reviewing launch data, a sleepless night haunted by the sound of engines roaring and tearing apart above the clouds. No one could undo what had happened. The astronauts were gone, their voices silenced, their dreams, shared with the world, extinguished in the cold Florida sky. All that remained were questions and memories, floating above the debris like smoke, refusing to disperse. Christa McAuliffe's classroom had been prepared for this day for months. The nation had watched as she boarded the shuttle with bright eyes, a simple desire to teach. Her students, unaware of the magnitude of risk, had celebrated her journey. Now, they mourned, not only for the teacher, but for the idea of innocence in exploration. They learned that knowledge could carry danger, and curiosity could end in tragedy. Their grief was raw and unpolished, untouched by the abstract numbers in NASA reports or the technical jargon of official hearings. Her absence created a ripple. The students' lives, the teachers around her, the family she had left behind, the nation's collective heart ached. Yet the reports and documentaries would reduce them to statistics, comforting yet hollow. The Rogers Commission began investigating immediately. Engineers, astronauts, and government officials testified. Evidence was reviewed, slides presented, graphs analyzed. The technical explanation was simple: O-ring failure in the right solid rocket booster. But the human story, fear, hope, hesitation, guilt, and courage was buried beneath the diagrams and formulas. The human cost remained largely invisible to those reading the reports. Lives interrupted, families scarred, dreams destroyed, all contextualized by a cold explanation that emphasized mechanics over emotion. And yet, among those who watched, worked, and survived, the narrative persisted. The risk, the oversight, the human error, and the hope that drove 7 people into the sky, they were remembered. Because the Challenger disaster was more than a mechanical failure. It was a story of trust, of ambition, and of the fragility of life when the pursuit of greatness ignores warning signs. Children who witnessed the tragedy learned a lesson they would carry forever: that the sky was not always safe, that heroes could fall, that the very people meant to inspire might vanish in seconds. Their curiosity became tempered with caution. Their trust in technology became interlaced with fear, and their understanding of human limits deepened before they had even left adolescence. The public responded with grief and outrage. Candlelight vigils, letters to NASA, memorials for teachers and astronauts. But the lessons were not just technical or political, they were human. How easily hope could be extinguished. How easily innocence could collide with ambition. How silences between launches could be as heavy as the roar of engines. Even decades later, the Challenger disaster continues to teach. NASA redesigned booster joints, improved oversight, and expanded safety protocols. The world improved technically, but the human lesson, the fragility of life, the consequences of decisions made in offices far from the launch pad remains raw and enduring. The tragedy echoes today, not in rockets, but in every ambitious human endeavor. In classrooms, laboratories, hospitals, and boardrooms, decisions can carry immense weight. Actions that seem procedural may determine life or death, and ambition, no matter how noble, cannot erase the human cost of oversight or neglect. The Challenger disaster reminds us that progress carries risk, but the real cost of progress is measured not in launch failures, but in lives altered, dreams lost, and the silence left behind. Above the ocean, above the clouds, the Challenger rests forever in memory, not as a lesson in engineering alone, but as a testament to human courage, human error, and the price we pay when ambition and oversight collide. And somewhere, the voices of 7 astronauts still whisper, "Remember us not only as heroes, but as humans."